Hey, Hardin County, it's Michelle Labus. It is April 22nd, and I'm here to report on the commissioners meeting today. So the only thing that was really on the schedule was Ty Matthews actually came in, and he came in person, didn't send a representative, so that was really cool. WKTN and Rob Radway were there. Also, Kitten Times Alex was there, and so they were there to welcome Ty to Hardin County. He had a couple things that he wanted to share with the commissioners about the budget process. So they're working on that. He's been in there for 3 months, and right away you get started in on that budget process, which I think is important of why you do your homework before you get in office so that you know what the issues are when you get there. So he's a House representative, and so the House bill has been passed through. It's on to the Senate, which would be Rob McCulley. They did not put any additional tax in there, so like tobacco tax or gambling tax. They didn't put any of that in there, which kind of means that we have less revenue from those entities. So HB 28 was something that he brought up that is it's about the coroner. So these smaller counties are having trouble getting coroners, especially down in the southern part of Ohio. And as a way to consolidate, they are looking at appointing a coroner rather than electing one. And so that way you can have a coroner working in different counties, and it just kind of makes it easier when you get somebody who's qualified for the position. You don't have to go through all that rigmarole. So that's what HB 28 is about. Now, Joe brought up a good question. So this is not something that happens very often in the commissioner's office, where I say, hey, that's an insightful question, or they've done their research and they're coming back and bringing substance to a meeting. In the year that I've been going, it's not something that happens very often, and I want to just give kudos to Joe for having a good question, right? So was this educated, prompted question? Possibly, but that's okay. You have to do your research when you're meeting somebody like Ty. And so he was asking, if we appoint the coroner, the commissioners would appoint them. Then if two commissioners are out of duty, the coroner steps up and is that other voting member, right? So they kind of have an important position in the hierarchy of county government. But if you're appointing them, then how can they then vote? And so Ty said he wasn't sure on that. He was going to go back and do some research. They then had some conversations about a lot of times the auditor steps up and has a big role in county votes and those kinds of things. The county auditor is kind of like a mother hen. I mean, they're the ones that are kind of supposed to be keeping track of everybody and making sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So they thought about, maybe they would switch it over to the auditor would step in rather than the coroner type thing. And so I just thought that was a good conversation and wanted to bring that up. Ty also talked about libraries. Libraries have been a big thing on the voting docket because the ads are kind of saying, hey, they're going to cut $100 million from the library budget. And Ty is saying, no, that's not really what it is. It's always smoke and mirrors. But the proposal, so the House has a proposal and the governor has a proposal. So if you go, the governor, he brought it out. Let's see. The governor's proposal is $531 million, and the House's proposal is $490 million. So it's up. So it was 1.7% of GRF, their revenue fund, and they have increased it to 1.75%. So that's actually an increase. Now, revenue fluctuates, and if revenue is down, then of course the number is going to come down. But as it stands, Hardin County will have an increase of $17,000. So kind of the advertising that you're seeing from the governor's standpoint, or where they're going to cut, is from the governor's proposed budget of that 531 million to the House's planned budget. So it's really, you're comparing two things that aren't actual, right? You're saying, oh, they're cutting it, but that's only if you go with the governor's plan, right? So they have a greater percentage, and Hardin County is going to get a little bit more than they would have otherwise. So the other thing is, there's only 2 states that give a percentage of their general revenue fund. All the other states have specific line items. That's what Ohio is looking at. It's a more stable, right? So there's a couple of things. One, it's more stable so that you don't have fluctuations, right? Because if your revenue goes down, then your amount's going to go down. And also, so stability, but also if you have a new governor that comes in, they could slash that price, or they could raise the price, right? So it kind of gives more control over that line item, rather than it being a percentage of revenue. So that's kind of the fight. It's not really, so just be careful when you're looking out there as far as the library funding. It is something I'm really interested in. Our libraries are in a tough situation because we have a county library that only gets 39% of its funding from the state. Well, 39% of the state funding goes to our county government, which has the biggest building, it has the most staff, it has the most programs, it takes the most to run, and yet it's using a very small portion of the state funding. And the other of that money is going to all the smaller Dunkirk, Forest, Mount Victory, Ridgeway libraries, and those are school libraries, right? So they get some funding from the schools to run their programs, but the way our local, we have a formula. So the state says, okay, here's your money that you're going to get. And then it hits our local formula, which was created by Mike Bacon years ago. And it has many, many, many different factors in this. I think 9 different factors are in this formula. And over the years, it has degraded our county government funding. And then when you lose funding, you lose services, you lose attendance, you lose money. And so essentially this formula is, defunding our county library. And we most definitely need to have a county library. And so that's something that as a community, we really need to be keeping our eye on because it's very important. And our county library is going downhill, and these smaller village libraries are excelling. And while some of them, Alger is not doing well, but they're excelling. They're having additions built on, and so it's a whole thing. We need to do a video about it. But so anyways, Ty was in to correct that situation. Yeah, so they're looking long term at that formula change of how to fund the libraries. The other thing is funding carryover for school systems. So the main budget has to be approved by July 31st or 30th, and then the Budget Commission approves it on August 1st. And they're looking at, for the schools, if the schools spent a certain amount of money this year, they can only carry over 30% of that funding for next year. And so they can't, and right now it's just in their general fund. They're just kind of sitting there. They can use it with whatever they want. No program is perfect. There is a way that if you take capital money, which this was another good question that was brought up by the commissioners, good for them, that if that money is for capital gains, so you're saving for a school or you're saving for long-term improvements, you can take, you have your fund, you have your 30%, and then anything extra can go into this capital improvement fund, and then it at least is locked in and slated for a project. The other thing so the idea is that the money that's given to the schools is to be used for that year. So if they're just holding on to money, and kind of moving it around or doing whatever they're doing with it, and they're not actually using it, then they don't need the money, right? So they're trying to say, hey, you need to use this money that you're given every year. And so Tim brought up, which again, in one meeting, we have 3 good questions that are brought up by our commissioners compared to all of last year that I've been there. So Tim brought up, because we have solar fields, 3 solar fields in our county, that those schools will be getting a lot of money from the solar fields because they take away property tax, right? Those fields don't pay property tax, but they pay pilot money to the school systems. But so the 30%, so over your 30%, you have to give back that money back to the local departments, right, in your property tax. So if your school has a bunch of carryover, then you should see a reduction in your school taxes. But Tim brought up that with this pilot money, we don't want to give back pilot money to the state, right, if it's over that 30%. And so Ty said he would have to look at it, but it's definitely a conundrum. Pilot is not the best solution, right? They signed up for this pilot. They've done all 3 solar fields with the same pilot, which is a little bit outdated because it doesn't account for bond issues. And, now you're going to see yourself get in trouble when they could have just said, we're going to keep property tax the way it is. You pay property tax on your real property and on the industrial land, and it's just the same. And you just get that property tax. Now it's all tied up in the legal mumbo jumbo and making things difficult. And so anyways, for USV and those schools, what's that going to look like? How's that going to play out with, that carryover? I don't know. So it's something we'll have to keep an eye on, something at least that was brought up to Ty as being an issue worth discussing with our House representatives. So anyways, I was just glad to see some engagement. Let's see, is there anything else? I think that's pretty much it. Fred asked at the end if they could have quarterly meetings with Ty. He said that it would be really nice if Ty would come in every quarter and give them an update. And Ty, of course, was very gracious and said, of course, that'd be a great idea. I think Ty is, it'd be great for him to come. And maybe if he does come to the commissioners, that would be a great opportunity to kind of snag him, like after that meeting, for other people in Hardin County, if they wanted to meet with him, that they could get a hold of him. So actually, maybe we should set something like that up. To have a little bit of office hours on those quarters would be a great idea. But anyways, so they are, the commissioners always like people to come to them and give them a report for what they need to know. So good for them for asking for their needs, and we'll see if it gets followed through on. But that was it for the day. They had a bid opening for County Road 190 for asphalt bidding. What I heard is that there was nobody who had put a bid on that, and so not sure. But commissioners, we've been watching them for a year. We know what they're going to do. And so anyways, we'll talk to you later. Bye.